The purpose of this safety video in the wood trade section is to help guard against those things which are possible, but not necessarily probable. As a result, I'm going to show you a few things about ripping material on the table saw. First of all, remove baggy clothing, because as you operate the saw, it could get caught up in the blade. Also, necklaces, rings, watches, those things should be removed. Keep the floor where you're standing clear so that you're not stumbling or tripping as you're advancing the material through the blade. Use any available safety devices which the table saw is equipped with. For example, in this table saw, I have a riving knife that prevents pinching of material as it exits the blade. Also, I'm going to set the blade height above the material approximately 1/4 inch to 3/8 of an inch. I'm also going to use push sticks. I have a push stick here, which is handy. I also have a push block for larger material if I wanted to use it. So, talking about the process first of all, make sure that you've selected the right blade for the process. This information will be covered in your module more fully. When I select a piece of wood to push through, to cut down, it should be relatively flat. Because if it's got some crookedness, some bow or twist, it might pinch the blade as you're advancing it. Also, this edge, which goes up against the fence, should be true, so that, for example, if I was pushing this through and this thing was bent like this, it would cause this material to get pushed into the blade, which could also be dangerous. A standard which we've agreed on here in the wood trade section is that should this gap in between the fence and the blade be less than 100 millimeters or 4 inches, you should be using a push stick or a push block. This can be easily checked. If your fist fits in between, then you don't need to use a push stick. You can, of course, but you don't need to. Also, when you're advancing the material through, you should always push it all the way through, whether it's with your hand or with your push stick. Never leave a piece in between the blade and the fence. We're not going to reach over the blade and move things out of the way. Either get somebody to help you on the outfeed side of the table saw or simply push it out onto the floor. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set this to a distance greater than my fist width. As I push this through, I'm going to use my thumb to push it through, use my finger to keep it flat, but I'm also going to try and hook my fingers here on the fence as an extra layer of precaution. You probably noticed as I pushed this through, that as I pushed it through, I had my fingers hooked here, I had 2 fingers down on the wood, and I was pushing with my thumb. And as this came through, I just carried on all the way past the blade. The next type of cut that I'd like to demonstrate, is a narrower cut. So I'm going to move the fence substantially closer. So this is approximately 1 inch. I'm going to have a look at my wood here, make sure that I have a true edge. It's relatively flat. If it wasn't flat, or if this wasn't a true edge, I would have to joint it first. I also have a look for staples or nails. Quite often on the ends of a lift of lumber, you'll find tags with staples in it. So I have my push stick at hand. My blade is just slightly above the material. And you'll see that as I push this through, I'll come across like this, and I'll push and I'll push, and I'll be supporting the material up against the fence like this, And as soon as my hands meet in this area, I'll grab a push stick and finish off the cut. So this hand is right here. It just sits there, keeps the material down, plus it pushes it up against the fence. I take the push stick, push it all the way through. When it comes to cutting sheet goods, even small pieces like this, the same rules apply. 4 inches and smaller, use a push stick or a push block. This wouldn't present any trouble at all. What does make me nervous is when we have relatively narrow and long pieces like this. I would not recommend using this tool to cut this piece off. There's a tendency for this piece to rock, and as a result, bind in the blade, and it's the most common cause of kickback that I've seen in the shop. There's no reason why, especially with this piece, which is relatively narrow, that you couldn't cut this on the miter saw.